Greetings and welcome once again to my new calculus channel. My name is John Gabriel. So as you can tell, I'm already having problems again with my right eye, but I'm soldiering on. It's been pretty difficult. So what I'd like to do is discuss the concept of infinity with you again today, and with the Zermelo-Fraenkel axioms in the background. Now, most of these garbage beliefs, because that's all they are. They're all beliefs, by the way. There's really nothing to this nonsense. It's all absolute circular uh, gibberish that doesn't make sense, and it doesn't matter which way you look at it. Um, you can say, well, it's consistent, etc. It's not, okay, and nothing about it has been established. It was presented at first by these morons, the Bourbaki Luddites. Okay, 40 of them in France. Okay, they were a pompous bunch of individuals. They were pseudo intellectuals that were masquerading as mathematicians, and they decided to canonize the idiocies, which you now hear of as, or which you learn of in real analysis courses, etc., as the ZFC axioms. Now, even an axiom itself is a very problematic word, and I'll give you a link to this and explain to you why it's problematic. And also, of course, to the article I'm discussing with you now. So these really were problematic for many reasons, but two of them in particular are really absurd. I mean, they just don't get more absurd than so-called axiom 6 and 9. Okay, so axiom 6 says there exists an infinite set, right? And then you'll have this statement here in symbols, by the way, because it looks very intimidating in symbols. And it looks like something which people who don't know anything about the bullshit of set theory, non-mathematical garbage, won't even question. They'll simply shake their heads and go, wow, isn't that cool? Mm-mm. It's not cool. It's nonsense. All right, let's see what it means, okay? Let's see what it means. Let's do a word for symbol, because without words, the symbols are meaningless. So it says there exists a set S such that the empty set, whatever the heck that is in S. So it's a set that contains another empty set. And for all x in S, the union of x, whether x is a set or an element, and the element x, in this case, which again can be a set or an element, because in set theory, there is no difference between element and set fundamentally. So again, for that union, it's in S. It's really it's a gem of idiocy, by the way, people. Total idiocy. And the only kind of academics who can subscribe to this are those known as set theorists, topologists, etc. They're the ones who couldn't do mathematics and had to get a PhD based on hand waving nonsense. Okay, and this is the kind of hand waving nonsense you will get halfway through your undergraduate math course. So I'd say about maybe 1.5 years to 2 years of your math course, which you shouldn't bother with because you can learn that stuff on your own. Half of that is useful. The rest of it, garbage. Not even mathematics, by the way. So, um, you know, this statement doesn't say anything about infinity. Okay, it's just given that fancy name, but it does imply a lot about infinity, as you'll see in a while, because of all the Bourbaki uh, axioms, axiom 6 is really the biggest garbage of the lot. And when it says something like the empty set is in S, how the hell can nothing be in something? And then well you'll say, well, the empty set is not nothing, it is something. Well, what is it if it's not nothing? One has to believe in this ethereal, vague concept called a set, which, by the way, has no definition. You can do anything you like with it. A set can be empty, it can be anything you like. So if you go to my channel and you type in ZFC, oops, ZFC, you'll see this fantastic video come up. This one here, and let's just show all. This video here will come up. The foundations of mathematics are not set theory of ZFC. You have to watch that to understand what I'm telling you right now. It's not a long video, okay? Not a long video, only 5 minutes, but you have to watch it. So what I'm telling you now is that you can't just conjure up things and say, ah, yes, the empty set is something. Without defining set, people, there is no definition of set. There is a whole 1 hour and a half lecture by a German mainstream mathematician on set theory on the ZFC axioms. I'll also look for that and put it in the link for you. Okay. Uh, so it would have to be something first, and it would have to be something defined. But they don't define it because they can get away with saying anything they like. If it's not defined, it can be anything, right? So they don't just decree it by divine fiat. They expect the faithful, which are fools like you, to nod along. Okay, in other words, just, oh wow, that is so cool. You know, the sycophants who are prepared to swallow anything, doesn't matter how long it is, whether it's 4 inches, 5 inches, 6 inches, or a mile long, they'll swallow it. Okay, well, and then comes the piece de resistance for all x. For all x. Which x exactly? Ask yourself that. Every x imaginable? Every x imaginable? Well, then congratulations. Okay, because if you've done that, you've just conjured infinity out of grammatical fog. Do you understand that? And if you buy that, you're not even a mathematician sphincter. That's that organ in your anus which prevents you from soiling yourself unless it's time for you to go. You're a certified imbecile. Okay? And it all starts with that beautiful opening. There exists. So we've got this quantifier here, this backward E. Looks so beautiful written backwards. And it's written backwards because mainstream academics usually do things from their asses. Okay. In other words, things start at the back. They don't start with the brain. They start down there. Most of their pleasure comes from that area. So there exists S, a set S, okay, and it's a decree, by the way. It just says there exists. There's no proof. There's no definition. There's not even a definition of S. You could say there exists blah blah boo. Okay. What the heck is that? You can say that if you haven't defined blah blah boo, whatever it is. You have to define it. So nothing is proven. And this is basically a whole bunch of crap that is built on belief. It's a religious theory. Okay, it's a religious theory. Zermelo and Frankl were incorrigibly stupid morons, just like all the fools who came after them and adopted this steaming pile of crap. Because really, people, that's all it is. It's crap. Okay. Now, and then comes the final act of mathematical theater. It's the ultimate hand waving moment, the ultimate hand waving moment. The union in S will do. The union in S will do. Now, this reminds me of something I saw in Star Wars. Let's watch it quickly, if you don't mind. It's very short.
Be in luck. I'm the only one hereabouts who has one. But they might as well buy a new ship. It would be cheaper, I think, huh? Saying which, how's he gonna pay for all of this?
I have 20,000 Republic dactaries.
Republic credits? Republic credits are no good out here. I need something more real.
I don't have anything else, but credits will do fine.
No, they won't.
Credits will do fine.
No, they won't! What, you think you're some kind of Jedi waving your hand around like that? I'm a Tridarian. My tricks don't work on me. Only money. No money, no parts, no deal. And no one else has a T14 hyperdrive, I promise you that.
Okay, so what I'm trying to tell you here is that I'm sort of that floating or uh, humming insect. And the Jedi is the group of mainstream math idiots, okay, who basically accept anything they hear on belief, on decree, by decree. In other words, one of their high priests, and they are a cult, one of their high priests says, this is how it is, and this is how it'll be, okay? And the rest of them follow. So, you know, it always blows my mind how stupid, naive, how incorrigibly ignorant mainstream math professors are. One can't reason with these people because their theory is not based on rational reason, logic. It's based on belief. There's very little difference between mainstream mathematicians, okay, and a religious cult. Very little difference. So these Jedi's, these hand waving delusional Jedi's, are convinced that they can bend reality. And a statement such as for all, what the fuck does that even mean? For all contradicts the fact that there is no last x. Okay, somehow the mainstream math buffoons remain gloriously oblivious to this. Right? They chant for all x as if it magically grants infinity. Okay, for all x, no problem. Never realizing they're just preaching nonsense with academic flair. I wouldn't even call it flair, I would call it idiocy. So here are some examples that I'm going to talk about now, which explain why infinity is 100% bullshit. Let's look at example one. And I'm going to get rid of the camera because it's easier to stream without it. Now, is infinity defined by a process or by its characteristics? For example, is there any process that continues without bound or without end? Think about that. Is there? I don't think so, because everything we know has a beginning and eventually an end. You can't say, for example, a third plus a ninth plus 1 over 27th and just say it continues indefinitely. It doesn't. It stops when you write down those last three dots called an ellipsis. Okay? So If there were a process that continued endlessly, let's suppose there were such a process, because something or someone keeps it going without bound, does such a process ever complete? And if it never completes, how is it different from any finite process? And here comes the most important question. Can any finite process truly represent the whole when the whole requires completion? Think about that. Okay, it can't be done. And let's take now a very simple example that a 2-year-old can understand. So to make a half, all right, the number a half, if you have a quarter, is that by itself a valid description of a half? No, it's not, because a quarter is not a half. You'd have to add more to a quarter to make it a half, wouldn't you? So you'd have to say a quarter plus another quarter. Again, think of the series a half plus a quarter plus an eighth. Does that represent 1? It never represents 1, okay, because no finite number of terms ever reaches the whole being 1. So the process may continue indefinitely in concept, but it never completes in reality, meaning infinity is a 100% junk concept. We shouldn't even use it in theory, in any theory, because we're not talking about infinity here, okay? And the limit of a series is not the same as the sum of the series. Ironically, the ubiquitous real analysis book says that, but somehow the high priests of mainstream academia don't get it. It's in Rudin's analysis. Okay? So in our reality, it is meaningless drivel. We simply do not have the cognitive capacity to make sense of it. And unless any concept can be understood, it should be treated with the utmost suspicion. So another example is the following. An infinite decimal expansion is a decimal representation of a number that never ends. Really? A number that never ends? Well, all numbers are finite. They end. How does one make sense of never ends? The only way I can think of is if there's no last term. However, that says nothing about infinity, because in order for infinity to be a thing, we need completion. Okay, so stop the video and just think about that. In order to complete, infinity would have to self-destruct, meaning it has a last term. Okay, so it's anything but cool, it's anything but amazing, it's anything but great, it's nonsense. Therefore, the never ends and no last term phrases will not do here, I say. Okay, they will not do. Let's go back to Watto and Ki Gon Jin. Okay, they will not do. The digits after the decimal point continue forever with no final digit. Well, and as long as you keep believing that, I keep producing frauds known as mainstream mathematicians, Abel Prize winners, and Fields Medal winners. They're all a bunch of frauds. Total, absolute, 100% frauds. Then you say something like it can be written down as a sequence of digits like digit 0 with a radix point, digit 1, digit 2, etc., and so on without stopping. Well, show me this without stopping part. Stop the video and think about that. What is this without stopping part? You can demonstrate that. I'm not convinced. The example stops at digit 4, you incorrigible morons. Think. Now, then they'll say something like this. There are 2 kinds of repeating decimals, or 2 kinds of, not repeating decimals, 2 kinds of infinite decimal expansions. The first one says the digits eventually form a repeating pattern For example, 0.333, etc., which equals one third. By the way, this is highly problematic. You know why? It contradicts the most important theorem in number theory, which says that a given number, any given number, cannot be represented in a particular base unless its denominator contains only the prime numbers 2 and 5 as part of its factorization. Okay, so in other words, it's saying if it contains any other prime number except 2 and 5, then you won't be able to represent it in a repeating fashion. Okay, and so why is the third not equal to 0.333? Well, I'll place a link to something called proof of the most important number theorem and put it in the details section so you can study it, because it's just too much for me to go through now. Then the other infinite decimal, they say, these absolute buffoons who are your math lecturers and teachers, is that the digits never repeat in any pattern. For example, decimals of pi or e. No, 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 no. You notice two patterns of numbers that may or may not be measured. You noticing that means sweet nothing about infinity. Okay, it doesn't give you anything infinite. And I can show you how to rewrite these two statements so that they make sense. Okay, here's the first one. The digits eventually form a repeating pattern, which means one third has no measure in base 10. You can't represent it in base 10. That's what it means when you have a repeating measure. Try it. 3/10 plus 300 plus 3,000. It doesn't matter how many terms you add. And even if you could do it forever, which you can't, by the way, that's the first thing that you can't. Let's just hypothetically imagine we could. You still wouldn't arrive at one third because it's impossible. Do you understand that? It's impossible. Now, a third has a measure in innumerably many other bases. It has a measure in base 3, for example. It's 0, 1 in base 3. In base 6, it's 0, 2. In base 12, it's 0, 4. Okay? The other statement about the non-repeating decimal says that the digits never repeat in any pattern. Okay? They never repeat in any pattern. That means that the given objects which we're trying to measure in that radix system are not numbers. They're constants without measure. Okay? They're not numbers because numbers don't go on forever. They have complete measures. They're not things that you just sort of approximate or say 0 point something dot dot dot. That's not a number. Okay? And what is 0.333 dot dot dot? It's not a number. It's shorthand for a series or a sequence. Okay? That's all it is. So even a terminating decimal such as 0.25 can be seen as infinite by one writing it as that. Excuse me, that's still infinite. That's still finite, I'm sorry. This is absolute drivel and it can only be seen for what it is, drivel. Okay, because if you have a radix template, you don't even need to use zeros. All you do is you put a 2 under the tenths column and a 5 under the hundredths column, and you're done. Okay. So we only use 0 because it helps us to disambiguate the value. 0 is not a number of any kind, and it can't be used in any arithmetic. Okay, because it's not a number. So I'm honestly convinced that mainstream mathematics academics have committed treason against humanity, and they should stand trial with the most severe penalty to be applied. I'm not going to say what it is because then my video can't be uploaded. Okay, these parasites, your lecturers and your teachers, have destroyed mathematics. But it doesn't end there. They've destroyed your lives, your children, and the planet you live on. Yes, my friends, It is that bad. So my message to young students is this: don't don't do a math course. Put these parasites out of business. Study mathematics on your own. By the way, tools like ChatGPT and Claude and all the others are exceptionally good, even though they're pre-trained with the bullshit of mainstream mathematics. They're pretty good, and you can learn the things that are really useful by using those AIs. So don't get yourself into debt for hundreds of thousands of dollars and waste your money learning all this crap, okay, about things that don't make any sense whatsoever. ZFC axioms, set theory, topology, real analysis. You'll find that every math professor or PhD has a dissertation which has nothing to do with mathematics. Absolutely zero. Because you know what? If it had something to do with mathematics, there wouldn't be so many of these turds with PhD after their names. Okay. In other words, it's got to be garbage because you can get away with defending such dissertations. Okay. You can say, well, if I define this as shit, then you can't say that my conclusion here is wrong because it's based on this shit definition. Okay? I have to use those words because there's no other way to describe these things. If you're not already a subscriber to my great channel, this is the New Calculus channel. Become a subscriber. Follow me on academia.edu. That's where you'll see this article. Okay. I'm one of the most read authors. Yeah, in fact, one of the top read authors. And become a member of my members only channel for $4.99 a month. Sometimes when I'm able, I share knowledge that I don't normally share with the public. So there is also a Discord link in the YouTube detail section, and you can click on it and join the New Calculus Discord. I don't run it, by the way, but you can join it. Well, that's pretty much it. I hope you enjoyed this presentation on that ultra bullshit concept of infinity. There's no such thing as potential or actual infinity. Both are nonsense, and Aristotle was an idiot to come up with those concepts. Okay, both of them are deeply flawed. Okay, just because he was an ancient Greek philosopher doesn't mean he was right. He wasn't. He was wrong. Okay, I'm John Gabriel. Till next time, take care.